Still here.
Society on the Legislative Committee of the New York Society. And this month, we at the Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society in Hudson Valley are hosting the monthly NYPAC meeting. So I'm just going to introduce, well, I just partially introduce myself and the rest of the members of the Psychedelic Society that are here. A little bit of what we're.
I just turned it off.
Locally, and then Brendan Avery from NYPAC will take us through the meeting and introduce Duffy. Currently, as I mentioned, I'm the Director of Outreach and Policy.
Hold on a second.
And legislation. Did a lot of work on a piece of legislation to decriminalize and legalize most naturally occurring psychedelics. That's coming up in the State Assembly this January, sponsored by the bills written by Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal. So I've been, and the Psychedelic Society, we've been putting a lot of our focus into working with and supporting that bill. And then coming up over the next months, where the focus is, and over the winter, we'd really like to put a lot of focus in building up more of the membership and the activity of the Psychedelic Society, and start focusing on local legislative campaigns to decriminalize psychedelics, to push for law enforcement moratoriums and policy changes connected to psychedelics. And it's looked at it after a lot of research and some false starts. Something like Kingston is the town and the base that we're going to be working on that from. So hope that all of you that are from the area and interested in being involved with the Psychedelic Society connect to one of us and get more actively involved. So with that, I'll introduce the rest of us and pass it on to Steph.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Bolto. I'm the events and outreach coordinator. I'd love to be able to have an introduction or meet you all, but come and introduce yourselves to me. Maybe later on today, we don't have time to do that, but meeting through. Can everybody hear something online?
Give us some thumbs up if you can hear us.
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, that's checking. So just a few things about events and outreach. So far, the Psychedelic Society, as a new organization, we've been celebrating together some of the sort of rituals as a community. So we've been having an annual solstice party and an annual summer solstice and an annual winter solstice party. So keep an eye out for the event that we'll be having in December for our annual winter solstice party, as well as other events where we just kind of more informally get together to talk about something that you read, right, in the news that recently came out about research, and something that angered you about psychedelics and capitalism and you know, cannabis, or any kind of topics that come up. We've been organizing very informal monthly meetings. Over the summer, we did it at a local park here in Kingston. In the past, we've done it even more informally at like a local farm. So if you go to our website and you sign up for our newsletter, we're at Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society.com. Okay. Sign up for user. We don't send out very much. We're not going to flood your inbox, but if you're interested in getting together with some like-minded people in the community, and the goal as the outreach coordinator is really just to create community here. We want to be able to answer people's questions. We want to be able to talk about things that maybe at home, in your family, or in your place of work, and where you socialize, you're not sort of talking openly about your own psychedelic use or asking questions about it. So we want to really create space and build community in the Hudson Valley.
Hey everyone, I'm Lee. I'm also on the board of the Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society. I'm the executive director, and I think Aaron and Steph basically covered it all. We're a group of people who love psychedelics for various reasons, and if you live in the Hudson Valley, you should definitely sign up on our website. And I just wanted to say thank you to John for letting us use this gorgeous space. Thank you so much.
Can I say one word?
Yeah, please.
Last night I survived the Chelsea Hotel, which I used to live there with Antonio Lopez, Andy Warhol, and all of that. So I'm not dressed that well tonight. I took a fall on the piano, had a little bit of you know, and drinking a little red wine. So if you guys like afterwards want a little red wine to join me, more than welcome in the private gallery in there. But this thing is really something special because I myself grew up in 68, 69, where we did a lot of taps. And what I don't like is that they stole the orange sunshine from us. And then we got into what we call the slam. And one thing, we got into mescaline. And then from that, we formed the New York Dolls, Kiss, Velvet Underground. And that's what's missing nowadays, is what we did in the Chelsea Hotel, Max's Kansas City, nobody's way back in 68. We had a revolution then that if we decided that we were going to go against somebody, we were united, and thousands of us. And we used to stick flyers everywhere, and we did. So I became the king of guerrilla marketing then. I think what you guys are doing is something special, and I thank you for all being here. And thank you, Charlotte, for making this thing happen.
Yeah, I met Aaron through a few times at a few different drug policy organization conferences, policy meetings, like working groups. And then I re-met Aaron at the summer solstice gathering for the Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society. And we had a really interesting conversation. I felt like Aaron was willing to listen and also explain his own experience in a way that was very engaging and looking to build on a big relationship. So I'm really excited that Aaron has come here and that everybody else who's here has come to meet and discuss what policies we're going to be looking at moving forward, the different ethical concerns that we might have around psychedelics. I'm just really excited that this big group's gotten together, and it looks like we're going to have some really great conversations. Thank you, everybody.
One more thing, I forgot to mention, in addition to the DCREM stuff, we also do integration at HPPS. We have a whole program offering integration circles, and we're starting those up again. And Simon Crasher is the new director of our integration circles, and he's here. And do you want to say anything?
Thank you. We're restarting the integration circles that we had last year. Dee Goldpaw, who is on the board, was running them, and I'm moving into the role of hosting them. They're going to be co-facilitated as well. So we're hoping to have facilitator training and move into the model of having co-facilitated and kind of peer-led circles for a place to share and explore psychedelic or entheogenic, also transpersonal experiences, and to have a community supportive space for exploring and integrating. And December 4th will be our first circle. It's going to be online 6:30 Sunday, December 4th. So if you sign up, you'll get information about that if you'd like to join. Thanks. And I'm not sure who's up next, but
I think Trinity, great.
We are so excited to be here, and thank you so much to Aaron and the Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society for hosting us. And I think, Sean, maybe I should run through the agenda. Well, I'm going to introduce myself.
yeah.
I never do. My name is Pauline Carey, and I'm one of the co-directors of New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, which is the statewide organization that formed, well, it's a whole history about that, but the New York Psychedelic, New York Psilocybin Action Committee is the main group, and our umbrella organization is New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, and the New York Psilocybin Action Committee formed after we did the first statewide symposium on legalizing psilocybin back in April. And there was so much interest among the psychedelic societies across the state that we decided to form this committee. And then it's now housed under New York Mental Health Alternatives. So we're so excited. And Avery is another co-director, and he will introduce himself.
Sure. So my name is Avery Stemple. I am one of the founders of Collar City Mushrooms. So we are an indoor urban vertical mushroom farm, mycological education center, and community gathering space. And so we started growing gourmet and non-psychotropic medicinal mushrooms. And most of the people coming into the farm said, "Hey, do you got those mushrooms?" And I had to unfortunately say no. And we started a dialogue, Corinne and I, and she was a producer for the Hudson Mohawk radio station out of the Sanctuary for Independent Media. And so that's why we decided to put this symposium together. And then when we, did that symposium, like Corinne said, we had so many people express interest in how can we help mobilize the people and create an accessible system. And so we started hosting meetings at the farm, and we tapped into the network that we had started to create while we were running the symposium that has now branched into many other people. And we have people online, quite a few people joining via Zoom, and we have members from Long Island all the way to Buffalo. And I see Dennis, actually, you drove from Buffalo to come here. I guess we'll talk about the I'm on the board later, but yeah, so that's me. And thank you so much, John, for allowing us to use your space. And thank you so much to the Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society for allowing us to come invade your meeting. And this is something that we hope to do across the state. So we do want to meet in all these different locales to help build the movement and build momentum and show that there are people all across the state that are vested in creating accessible systems for this medicine. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to Duffy. And I'll turn it back over to Corinne, and then
Corinne Sarah is the chef. She's doing some spinach pie, and she just asked, can she use your product in the next batch?
I'm just gonna talk about the agenda so you know what to expect. We've been meeting every month, so we're so grateful to be doing this with people across the state, and I'm so glad to see people from the capital region and as far north and west as Buffalo join us tonight. But what we're gonna do tonight is Avery's gonna give some updates from the national scene, like what's going on with psilocybin and legalization across the country. What are some of the new developments and the news that we should be aware of? Then I'm going to invite Matt Duffy up to come and speak about what just happened in Colorado this past last week. And we're going to learn a lot from him about his journey in this arena. And then I'll ask him some questions, and I'm sure he'll have a lot to say, and then we'll open it up for some questions from you. Then we're going to give you some updates on what's happening with the New York Psilocybin Action Committee, some of the fundraising that we've done, some of the activities that we've done. And we're going to introduce you to Mike Avella, who is here tonight from the Capital Region, who is working with us pro bono through the end of the year to help talk to the legislature and see what's possible in 2023 in terms of decriminalization or access to psilocybin. And then we'll talk about what's on the horizon. We've got a bunch of activities coming up at the Capitol. We've got a week-long lobby situation coming up and some other things. So stick around for that, and we'll take questions throughout. So
and if you're online, if you're joining us via Zoom, Charlotte is going to keep an eye on any questions typed into the chat, because the sound is just coming out of my laptop, and I don't think we'd be able to hear you. So if you do have any questions, just type it right into the chat. I'm giving an update.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, sure. All right. So yes, the psilocybin, the fungal wave is sweeping across the country. We are seeing so much interest amongst people everywhere. If I've been following all these different states and the legislation that's been kind of pushed forward, and even Texas has passed something that allows for the study of psilocybin as a medicine. And Colorado, as you all should know, did pass Proposition 122. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a minute. That creates the second legalized system in the country. The first federally funded psilocybin study since this 1969 actually was just approved. And this is a study out of North Carolina looking at smoking cessation. So people trying to quit tobacco smoking. And there's a website called clinicaltrials.gov. And if you guys haven't found that, it's actually really fascinating. And you can put in any kind of parameter that you're looking at, whether it's an ailment or like a specific drug that's being studied. And right now in New York alone, there are either 7 or 9 studies specifically focusing on psilocybin and its impact in some way on health. And across the country, there are 71. So 71 studies currently being undertaken by universities and other health organizations in the country that have been approved and gotten funding from mostly private investors. Like I said, just that one is gotten federal funding. And it's really exciting. I know, we just had an election, and one of the sponsors for one of the bills in New York was up for election, and he, there was a little touch and go as to whether he was going to be reelected, but he did win out in Buffalo, Pat Burke and Linda Rosenthal, the other one here in New York, that has also proposed legislation. And then what is Gustavo Rivera actually had a bill in the Senate that will reschedule any substance in New York following any changes in federal law. And right now, Cory Booker and Randy Paul have co-sponsored a bill to allow psilocybin access to the right to try law, because the FDA right now is fighting that, and they're trying to allow psilocybin to people who have no options left. And the inside information that I've heard from a couple different channels is that MDMA and psilocybin are going to get rescheduled in the next 2 years federally. So it's really exciting. Yeah. It's a really exciting
FDA approval.
Right.
They have.
Right. Yeah. Well, they came out and said that it was a breakthrough technology, medical technology. So it's gonna happen. So yeah, let's get down to that. That's kind of an overarching countrywide thing, and then Duffy, want to join us on stage here? It's part of the art.
I know. So we are so lucky to be joined by Matt Duffy today. I think I remember this correctly. I brought the wrong phone up here with the bio on my other phone, but Echo Futurist. Is that what you call it? Duffy has been active in the psychedelics movement for a while now, and has been really leading a lot of efforts in Colorado, and recently spoke out against Proposition 120 that just passed, which is so interesting. And so I wanted to start out the conversation just by asking you to introduce yourself. People probably read Duffy's bio, but maybe you could say a few words about your history in this movement. And then I'd like to know, then we can get into more about Proposition 120.
Sure. Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Joe. Yeah. Great to work. So yes, Echo Futurist. Background before I started getting into this work was an ecological justice work. I taught chemical research for a while, and I've been friends with mushrooms since I was about 15. And I just kind of landed in Colorado. Long story short, my life unraveled into Colorado. And right before the joined the Denver psilocybin initiative that decriminalized mushrooms in Denver. So shortly after moving there, I heard about that campaign was happening. They were just rallying people to start the petition videos. So I joined and pretty swiftly got very involved because I had the time back then. I guess I still do. And yeah, we became the first city to decriminalize psychedelic friendly there. Outlines semi prohibition and lies. So we got 2013. We got that was 2018. In the so yeah, the campaign began. It was kind of a couple years rolling into when it actually passed was 2019. So SPORE, the Society for Psychedelic Outreach and Education, emerged out of that.
Excuse me, would you guys mind speaking a little louder because it's difficult for the people over
No, I mean,
here.
I will. I have a role with yeah, that feels like pretty comprehensive. Yeah, enough.
So when Denver decriminalized, what was the model that they used? How did that come about? Because we're just at the beginning, we're just at the beginning of this process of the work. And so we're curious to hear about the different models. There's legalization, there's decriminalization, there's medicalization. What did Denver do and how did that decision come about?
Yeah, so we just simply look for decriminalization at the local and state level in Colorado. We have the ability to have community-sponsored ballot initiative, where anyone can really sponsor ballot initiative in Colorado. Unfortunately, New York, we don't have that, but so you have to go to the legislature. Way different process. For local municipal reform, what we've seen a lot with different nature is city council referendums. So that's not what we had a citywide ballot initiative. And so we had to gather a bunch of signatures and we would vote, and it was close to 51%. But more people voted for mushrooms than voted for mayor. And yeah, so we just straight up decriminalization of mushrooms sent the decriminalization has been expanded to include herring and cultivated that ceremonial and okay. Still in this, so we're standing up. No. Yeah, so just decriminalization as it's actually what I understand is actually there's a nuance between use prioritization. So in Denver, it's really prioritized. So it's the lowest law enforcement priority. It's like beneath J. Since then, there have been a couple arrests, but they were just packaged with other activities, including like very flagrant distribution and branding all around that stuff. But yeah, in Denver, it's been criminalized. But at a city level, it's you're up against a law, but in state level, it's federal law, but to really, protect the city of Denver and you can expand the municipal initiative as much as you can, but to give real dollars protection.
So can you tell us what Proposition 120 is? And then I kind of want to go back, 122, sorry. I want to go back and talk about access versus decriminalization versus deprioritization, which is another thing. But first tell us what 122 did last week.
Yes, so Proposition 122 is kind of a two-pronged initiative. There's a regulatory which took up the brunt of the 13-page act It's a completely new act in Colorado's bill. And the personal use section that addressed decriminalization. And the decriminalization of psilocybin, ibogaine, DMT, and mescaline, not peyote. And the decriminalization in the law is to an extent that's not clarified yet, and this is one of the more controversial parts of the law. In the language, it says, included in the personal use section, is the necessary amount for cultivation for sharing for personal use, but it doesn't define what necessary is, so that vagary leaves it up to many people's interpretation. First line of discretion, potentially being the police. And that will probably have to be sorted out through courts. And then the regulatory framework, it just includes psilocybin for now. But the law created an advisory panel that's selected by the governor in cooperation with the campaign community advocates. And one of really the only specific power of this panel. There will be other, like suggestions that this panel will make in implementation and rulemaking around the regulatory framework. But specifically in the law, it says that the panel can choose to introduce the other 3 substances included in the group, natural medicine. So there's 4 medicines that I included into the regulatory framework. So to just recap that, only psilocybin in the regulatory framework for now. In 2 years, there will be the ability to decide as a panel to
Hi, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to get somebody to join.
Connected, but I don't think it's gonna let me do that.
Okay.
I mean, a whole, I can.
No, it's.
That's what we're trying to get some, because they cannot hear you guys at all.
Can set up a PA system in humans.
That might not be a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Do you need help with that?
Right, but I think Karen was logged in.
Whose laptop is this?
It's mine.
Oh, okay. No, I was, they could hear from my phone, it wasn't me.
What if you just put the laptop?
What, yeah, let's just put the laptop on it. Yeah.
We're moving the laptop to the front. Yes. Yeah, he doesn't need mics. All right.
I'm sorry, I thought that would work.
No. Okay. Here you go.
Perfect. All right, you guys. How's that?
That's awesome. Best seat in the house.
Best seat in the house.
Hopefully folks online can hear us now. Give us a little thumbs up if you can.
See a thumb.
Virtual thumbs up. Do we see a thumb?
Okay, yeah, good. All right, wait. Sorry about that.
Thank you, because I don't want you guys to be looking away from.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Right, so the big question that I asked Duffy just now was, what is the
Can you guys hear?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, no.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll make it work.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big question I asked him is, what is the difference between Prop 122 that passed last week and what that allows and what Denver did. So basically, what's the difference between what happened in Denver with deprioritization, where you're not really going to get arrested for possessing psilocybin, and the decrim that passed with the Proposition 122, which I presume would allow you to use, grow, gift, and what's the other? Use,
Gather.
grow, gift, gather, right? So what's the difference? What did 122 do, really?
So 122, first, the initial question, legalization and decriminalization, what's the difference? Simply, my understanding, decriminalization can address, everything outside of sale, basically. Like legalization, I've heard it said that it's basically just permission to commodify. So commercialization, the development of like a legal market, that's considered legalization. Decriminalization is just removing criminal penalties for possession, for cultivation, for anything basically that's not sale. And then, anything that's illegal or unlawful outside of possession and everything around grow, gather, gift is still illegal if there's full decriminalization. But there's a lot of nuance because there's decriminalization reform that's happened around the country that's it'll be like to an extent. So like 6 plant rules with cannabis, for instance, or like 4 gram limit or however many gram limit for psilocybin, or in the DPA's initiative in Oregon that came with 109, I believe was I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like a blanket kind of like 2 or 4 gram limit. Don't quote me on that, but there's gram limits to substances in some decriminalization reform. Some people would say that that's not really decrim, but it's definitely still reform. But yeah, if you want to kind of like suss out more of like a distinction with what, okay, so Prop 122. Yeah, so Prop 122 kind of was an attempt at mirroring both, which I feel like most people are like, that's probably what we need to figure out. That there doesn't need to be this versus thing. And one thing that irks me is I often hear like decriminalization versus regulation, which assumes that people in communities can't regulate, just kind of in that framing. Which, we live, this is America, and there, part of the mainstreaming is there's a whole new population that can be seen as a market of people who want to access, treatment that might actually work for them. And then there is, the movement that's more of like the people's movement that, that's kind of emerging from the mycelium and the underground, to reclaim basic rights, and what I hope to see in the marriage of these sorts of like that tension between, state regulation, what would be therapeutic, medical, and federal level, decrim is like we prioritize protections for people first, so no one should be going to jail for any drug, period. And these decriminalizing and policy reform around psychedelics can open up the larger effort to abolish the drug war entirely, and create more compassionate alternatives for restoration, and rehabilitation. But what happened in Colorado, to loop it back because I'm about to go on all threads, is definitely a step. I would say it's a solid step. In what direction, we do not yet know, because it's up to us. Like policy isn't going to do it for us, just like the mushrooms don't do our healing for us. You show us the work, you can open the door, we got to walk it, right? So I do feel, not to like belittle the opportunity of this moment in Colorado. We came out opposed in a political moment. In binary politics where you have to choose a yes or a no, it's you know, it's actually never, we're much more complex than that. And of course, in psychedelics, I'd hope we're much more, you know, complex and can hold the paradoxes and there, you know, just being on the ground of that campaign, there was a lot more common ground and bridging than what the optics around the political spectacle provided.
So let me ask you a question about that though, because we met you when we were starting to form the New York Psilocybin Action Committee. We reached out to you to learn some lessons about SPORE and what you all did. And so when you came out really publicly against the ballot initiative in Colorado, I was surprised.
Yeah.
Tell us why you came out against it.
Yeah, I really would encourage everyone here to read it, to read the open letter, because I still stand by what we came out with. There were some primary problems around the process and the policy itself, and the gray area. One of the gray areas I've already spoke to around personal use, with, you know, many Coloradans thinking like, oh, it's fully decriminalized, you can do, and it's actually not. On the ballot itself, it said limited personal use on what we actually voted on. It said it in the ballot after a lot of denial about the, you know, what was being written off as like sort of like unbased claims and, you know, like a distortion. We're like, it says it clearly here in the law, and then it ended up saying it in the ballot. Going forward, that's common ground that I've been working with proponents of the campaign and opponents and everybody in between to, you know, commit to prioritizing that is clarified, and that we stand together and saying like, no, police have no discretion when it comes to personal possession. Anything else is unlawful, that's a different story, but and then around equity, you know, for me, and I'm just going to speak for myself, the mushrooms especially, but pretty much all of the medicine work that I've done, there's a common experience of interdependence and interconnectedness. And, you know, for me, the medicine working through me feels like restoring relationships. So if we're not restoring and working towards reparation, where there has been generations of trust broken and more marginalized communities exploited, and that's not built into the policy work and the economics that we're creating around medicine, it's not equity. People are talking about equitable access. That's a fallacy. Like access, to your earlier question, is the pie, a simple metaphor, and equity is the bakery. Healing and sovereignty are inextricably linked. If we're going to support people in their healing, we have to empower communities and resource communities to develop their own medicine infrastructure and work cooperatively between communities. There's a lot of healing that needs to happen between different bodies, right? So for us, and we got called prohibitionists, but it wasn't. Thank you. But it wasn't. It wasn't enough. We didn't see what felt to be a meaningful commitment to putting community first. It did feel like commercialization over community. It did feel like profit over people, but we're here now and we have to make the best of what we have. And everybody's got good intentions. I believe it. I see it, even if I'm like, you also have other intentions. But people genuinely do want to make a positive impact, you know, and we're not going to solve all the world's problems, you know, in a bill or a ballot initiative. We have to be in this for generational work, and healing the systems, composting the systems and institution and culture that keeps us
diseased is part of our own healing journey together as we walk each other home. So in that spirit, I'll just wrap up this real quick. What I am seeing is a lot of genuine commitment to following through on conversations that were had throughout the process, which was super rushed. I mean, if we want to really build trust, especially with more marginalized communities, and make sure that all of the key stakeholder groups and communities are actually equitably represented in the process, because we're not going to have equitable outcomes without an equitable process. It's just like, you're not really healing if you're just treating symptoms, right? Which is that sometimes we need to just treat symptoms, but the process has to be holistic for real healing to occur. Yeah. So yeah, going forward, I see a lot of genuine commitment and a lot of real lessons learned on all sides, including mine. I take responsibility and accountability for places I certainly fucked up. And SPORE was not perfect. We were not the heroes in the process. We all play protagonist, sometimes villain, anti-hero, side character. We play all of these parts, so going forward, my prayer that I want to walk is that, we dignify each other's perspectives. There's valid perspectives across the board in the whole process. Again, the binary politics make it seem like, people don't see and feel each other, and it can actually start to really feel and look like that. But we got to do better by each other. And I think there were a lot of good lessons learned, and ultimately, the struggle in the community. So SPORE's involvement in the process, we formed a coalition called the My Coalition, which became the primary vehicle for grassroots or mycelial input in the process, and really actually made a huge impact on the language. But again, the extent to which community input was included didn't feel satisfactory to many of us, and ultimately us coming out opposed publicly was a stand with the most marginalized people who didn't feel at all represented, and in many ways felt disrespected. And for us, it's more important to build trust than to just form some idea of progress for the longer generational work that we have.
I have one more question, and then we'll check the virtual and we'll see if folks here have questions. And it goes back to something we were talking about with regard to access versus, decriminalization. I think the drug policy movement has been fraught with disagreement over incrementalism. We've dealt with it here in New York around cannabis. You start out with medical marijuana, which was a decades-long fight. And then how long does it take for what they called recreational marijuana, or then they rephrased it as adult use marijuana. So a lot of us want to avoid those mistakes here. But in some ways, I wonder whether decriminalization efforts open up access to psilocybin for people who are already familiar with it, and many of whom can operate in this area with impunity anyway. And I think about people. I work in the end of life movement, and I think about older dying, and are they going to feel comfortable with a deprioritization or a decriminalization, or are they going to be more comfortable with a medical model? And that's one of the things that I think we're going to face here in New York is not a fight between deprioritization and decriminalization. It's, opening up, decriminalizing psilocybin to open it up to people who are already using it versus maybe opening up this treatment for people who aren't comfortable in the current underground and that might not even know how to access it. So I guess I'm wondering if you can speak to that, because that's one of the things I think we're going to be facing as a choice, really.
Yeah, it's a really important point. And I honestly do feel like I've come to agree with the analysis on like the just decrim, that it's actually privileged and doesn't do enough itself. And that it's we have to stand for everybody's capacity to heal. And I have a lot of I don't have a lot of faith in institution or the state to regulate medicine like this. This is people's medicine. This is folk medicine. And while it's here's I think the edge. While it's our right to commune with nature and to heal, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we are protecting and creating systems of care that are sustainable and regenerative and prioritize the already endangered communities and ecosystems that medicines come from. And we also, there are people, like you're saying, who might not find the sort of hope that they need immediately in just the decrim framework. And though we're not gonna, these medicines aren't our saviors, and we're not gonna save everybody. Like what we can, I think, at best do, for me, the therapeutic and the medical models and all that, that's gonna happen. It's happening. It's already happened. That stuff is being pushed ahead. It's got all the money behind it. Like that stuff's on lock. Like, don't worry about it. Except do a little. But you're worried about it not happening. You don't need to. What we do need to make sure is that we really work and advocate, and when we have to struggle to ensure the protections for the people and make sure that the resourcing and the power shift that's necessary to actually empower community-based medicine infrastructure and stewardship. That should be our number one priority, and that doesn't mean just decriminalization. It can. I do see, the futures, and I don't know if it's possible in America in the way my idealistic mind wants it to be, of that, just through decrim, you could create co-ops, and you could, medicine could be free, and that you could create an economics where, just the services around them and membership to the co-op and maybe the other kind of mushrooms are being sold, but the medicine itself is free. I think that we should work as hard as we can to create the space for that. And then the state regulated therapeutic medical framework and all of that, the facilitated adult use, whatever you want to call it, will be deeply informed and actually guided by the ground, by the people. And there is a real need to consider order of operations here, like first things first, right? And it's very complex, and I think there's many good cases for why, for people who don't agree with me about what needs to happen first. One is, more to your point that you're making, like a lot of people won't feel like they can even enter the space until there's some legal protection, right? And more marginalized people might be in that category. But then at the same time, it's like, how are people going to feel like they can enter the space if we're not doing the work in community to actually outreach and diversify and say, like, what do you need and what do you need to lead? Like, how can your community actually be actually represented in the policy that's being made? And I see a lot of savory shit going on. It's just like, and I'm not separating myself from that. I've totally been that person for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think we need to humble ourselves, and community's the medicine, and we just really got to hold together in community And strong movements will form from that, but we gotta start with community. There's too much like agenda, like we gotta make it all happen really quick, and the damage of that is not medicine. It's not.
Do we have questions in the chat or questions from you or questions?
Well,
from-
just real quick, I love that you said compost the system, acknowledging that good things can grow from the deconstruction and still like retain some of the nutrients that were in the system. That really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I just want to point out is, have you looked into the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society's model at all? Because the psychedelic co-op is exactly what they're.
Is that Colin?
Yeah.
I was supposed to go with him on Thursday,
Okay.
but my flight is actually on Wednesday, and I thought it was. But we're gonna try to see if we can link up.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Pammy is on the call too, and I know she's part of the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society as well as on the board of NYPAC. But having talked to Colin and you know, he said basically that essence of community being the substrate out of which healing can grow is really that I completely agree. That's the crux. Yeah.
Compost the empire.
Compost the empire. I love it.
Let's go to the chat first and then we'll take some questions.
Sure. Does anyone online have a question that they want to type out or?
In the meantime, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. And I did want to offer on behalf of, Dan Sam and the New York Harvest Festival, praise that we love, which is to overgrow the government. We've been operating one of the largest open air markets, for decades in opposition to the law, and really change is led by the people.
Yeah.
And I grabbed onto something that you said, and I want to highlight and offer a question around it. Because it's something that comes up a lot. I've been in drug user organizing, since 2000. I've worked on campaigns all over the country. I'm a member of the national leadership team of the National Survivors Union. And one of the reasons I've stayed more distant from psychedelic societies is because of the idea of psychedelic exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things that you might offer? I heard it in your speech, and I wanted to just go back and grow that idea, right? So what can we do to promote more solidarity around the idea of drug user human rights?
Yeah.
And to move away from this idea of exceptionalism, where we're just fighting for this or we're just fighting for that what can we do to promote solidarity between the movement?
Okay, so.
Yeah, quick, you have the answer, right?
I've given this a great deal of thought. I really appreciate the question. There's a really beautiful writer, Isabel Wilkerson, who has this metaphor for basically like what it is we need to heal, and that why do doctors ask us about our medical history and parents and grandparents' medical histories? Because you can't diagnose an issue unless you know history. And so if we have to know the history of the drug war. Like the psychedelic movement has to learn what that's about. And I see that happening. I think for the most part, people are largely privy these days. I mean, John L. Rickman, who was Nixon's one of his top aides during that era, straight up said it. He said that we knew exactly what we're doing. The two biggest enemies to the Nixon administration were the anti-war left, or the hippies, and Black people. And so we couldn't just criminalize people for having an identity, but we could criminalize their drugs and then break up, huh?
They stole it.
They did all of it, but.
They stole it. They stole Orange Sunshine.
Yeah. No, so just to kind of set a context there, I think what I'm getting at is they're saying psychedelic exceptionalism, but it's supremacy. It's not my drugs are better than yours, it's I'm better than you. That's what's underneath that. And I think we have to look at it like that to even address it, right? And I think if we can look at it like that, it's more bioavailable. I mean, that hurts. That's like, ugh. but we need to feel that, like, oh, I'm doing that thing. I don't want to be that. And I think, maybe an easier space for us to reckon with it more commonly, because most people who are in the psychedelic field are siloed. We care about ending the drug war largely, not everyone. But there's exceptionalism even within just psychedelics. It's like ceremonial use only, or like, my way of using is better or whatever. And there's just a lot of composting to do within that. So, we should, when we're building coalitions, it's crucial that we build intersectionally, not just with different identity groups or different guilds of community, but other movements too. What other movements are very aligned with ours? Clearly, the larger movement and the drug war is super aligned. Psychedelic policy reform, there's already a lot of bridging there, but there's a lot of work to be done. Harm reduction as well. Also, like regenerative agriculture, land back, food sovereignty, abolish prison systems. Like we have to build those bridges, though. We're a young little baby movement in many regards, and we need to learn from our movement elders. And I think that's one of the biggest actual lacks in the movement, is that we don't really have a solid, I do feel like I have some, and there definitely are these people, but where's this movement's elders and mentors, right? I think this generation is really tasked with seeking that and calling that in, before we just start acting a fool out here. My friend was used a maiden mother crone sort of continuum to kind of address what she saw of the movement that I'm a part of, and she's not in it. She's like a bioregional herbalist. She was like, y'all a bunch of maidens. Y'all are like a bunch of maidens. So I think we need to mother it up at the very least. It's prone energy. Sure.
Yeah, but I think, and just to speak to that too, I think, we talk about psychedelic integration sessions. I think we need community integration sessions. And that, if you look around right here, we're pretty racially similar right now.
Yeah.
And how can we mobilize other people to join in and be part of that? And it is reaching out to people who feel marginalized and have those legit additional fears for stepping out of line, and the additional penalties that are just automatically lumped onto certain groups. And it's we need to do more work to make people feel welcome and give them voice to speak out.
Yeah.
And here I'm saying that from my spot of privilege, but it's just
no, yeah, you're right.
It's that I think is part of it too. Is we need to just do more community integration.
Yeah, where are those spaces that already exist? Where people of other cultures are gathered. I just came from a Psytrance festival. A bunch of Middle Eastern and Jewish people who are all celebrating and sharing psychedelics.
Yeah.
We should go there instead of expecting them to come to us.
Right.
I think that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
Let's go right now. What are the idea? Taking a show on the road or just having it?
Hudson has been a grower for about 10 years now. We have been dealing with the community for a little over a year now. Part of the Dam Sam community also, and we do festivals all over the country. Well, mainly on this side, I would say, but we have been in this field for a long time, working with the people. We deal a lot, our products that we make is a lot of microdosing products, tinctures, brownies. We make all the products ourselves. We've been on the front line with our booth, and we're basically selling it at all festivals. We're a huge success. We see that
Then somebody has approached us in a sense like really more the medicine.
Yeah, no,
More
I
the
get you.
medicine themselves. They're going around and they're like, I need the medicine for myself. And they're like, that I have to go and so the people for this one, you need this. And we have been working with all colors of people. We work with Black people, we work with every single person that come to us. We have been in this so long now, and we see the success, and people who are been on heroin for a long time come to us for the medicine. And if they can't afford it, we give it to them because we see this person is struggling and has pain. And this is what this is about, right? Like alleviating people's trauma, people's pain, and we all have it, we all share it. So the mushrooms to me is such an ancient medicine. It is so needed, and we are drawing people in. They just come to us for this, like from all we're getting calls from people who need the medicine, and we buy and gives it to them, even if it has to be for free. So be it. And when we have worked with people that have been on heroin, smokers, alcoholics, we've seen it all, and great success. People on heroin have come off heroin because of the medicine that we've been given. And people will stop smoking, drinking. We see it all over, and we keep track of the people that we work with. They call us, we check in with them. So I really see this is going to happen regardless of it gets legalized. It is happening already.
And you're saying, and what's gonna happen?
The medicine is going to spread, and the medicine is spreading. It is an underground. The mycelium underground, it is just spreading. It's terrible. It really is.
I am
And we are also starting to do ceremonies now. We just did our first ceremony with the psilocybin, and it was great success as well.
I'm getting slightly concerned about the time, and I know we've got Mike Avella here that he was going to give us a rundown of the elections last week, the elections and their effect on our campaign. Should we do that?
I have a question. I think might tie back to what she was saying.
Okay.
Because I understand what you say about community outreach as being more open. So my question is that, like, given broader campaigning for psychedelic decriminalization and legalization, there are a lot of organizations like MAPS and organizations that accept government funding or that accept getting to a higher degree of more clinical like funded by like hedge funds and other kinds of like a lot of either campaigns or groups that are making a lot of like amazing advancements in medicine with psychedelics, like MAPS, accept funding from the government, from DARPA, from hedge funds. And so, there is some, I think that there's a level of vulnerability that I think some people may expect, like the community aspect with mushrooms of just giving it freely. And then also there's the medical needs and other somewhat necessary aspects of actually getting this out all over the United States and having full use of psychedelics completely accepted by the federal government. So as activists, how do you toe that line between being really involved in community efforts and then also being able to digest your message for larger funding groups, and how do you workshop that?
Oh, it's failing forward.
Trying something and doesn't work.
It's my idea of success is succession. That it's actually about like it's failure, it's dying well, and mushrooms have taught me, I'm still learning how to die well. And there, I think actually what I want to say to the questioning and tying it to what you were saying is that there needs to be, we need to create spaces, and I don't think that in public and on social media is where it's actually going to get worked out, but like it's in the public sphere, and there's, you know, something in the air now, and there, so that it's a really hard part of this work. It's like, how do you create messaging and like the memetics, the cultural DNA to kind of shift at a meta level, and also, you know, how do we kind of like create the incubators for like real safe conversations around stewardship and like what is it that we're actually doing here? I feel like there's a lot of again saviorism projected onto the medicine. Like if we just get the medicine out to everyone, that the medicine's going to take care of everything. And right, and I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. What I heard you saying is like it's happening, it's going to happen, and that is happening, but like what is it? You know what
It is, it's the earth is.
yeah, and you know,
It's the balance. This and that.
we're in a time of great unraveling,
We
right?
lost connection,
Yeah,
bringing it back home, and she's doing it.
I'm with it. I feel you. And it's like, so what's our responsibility in facilitating the composting? Like there's unraveling, there's great upheaval and transformation. We're living in the 6th mass extinction. It's levels on levels. We can't control it. We have to surrender, right? But like actively surrender. We have a responsibility to take care. It's set and setting. It's not just the room and the plants and the Enya. Setting. Aaron, I'm sorry. Set and setting is culture and community. So if we're not being really intentional about, you know, people can have an assisted psychedelic therapy session. That's a catalyst for what? When you're in that space, you have a divine experience and you're very malleable. True that, or like potential for, you know, further programming. Like if we're deprogramming, what's the new program that's going to upload? I don't think it's necessarily full Gaia consciousness. Like it could be a lot of other things, and we know that there have been massive studies and experiments done proving this. So yeah, how do we create the conditions that can really be like truly healing and not just using medicines as more powerful, profitable coping strategies that are really more about making people more well-adjusted than wellness, right? There's a huge difference. And so I think that some of that conversation, it's time for that to start going public. And when you start doing that, you start tickling the dragon. Like you're talking about the systems on the systems and people who are implicated in that, which is, by the way, all of us. Like all of us are part of the matrix, going in and out in our ways. But you know, when someone hands you your pill, really make sure, is this Morpheus or is it Mr. Smith? You know, like who the stewardship is part of the set and setting too. So yeah, I just think that's why it's actually really crucial that we slow the fun down. Slow it down. We don't know, I don't think, nearly enough about what we're doing, and there's a lot of irresponsible just like rushing because it's wide open, and there's like viability now all of a sudden with the mainstreaming, and I know we want to change all these laws, right? But like, there's some crucial community work and like context, like what's the set and setting for the collective setting for the integration of psychedelics into larger society. I don't think we've built that yet. So at all. And it's not gonna come perfectly in order, right? Like it's messy emergence. I'm just saying though, I think we could in our enclaves, pump brakes, kind of ground the work that we're doing in these sorts of conversations and then, you know, advocate and get active from that place.
So.
Wow. Yeah.
Do you have one question that someone asked specifically to what it's, I hope. And but that was really well said. But
Yeah,
absolutely.
really was.
Yeah. So I just wanted, before you jump into ending, because the only thing was, can Matt speak into the details of Prop 122 and licensing? Because I heard something about Oregon licensing costing 5 figures and something about only allowing for synthetic psilocybin use. And was this discussed for Prop 122 as well?
Yes, there has been discussions around, you know, what Prop 122 sets up. And again, so much will depend on implementation. So this policy just opens up the door. What it will actually be, we have to shape that. You know, one of the biggest problems that I had with the initiative was around what I felt like a lack of genuine equity. We advocated for a fund that would, you know, take some like startup fees and then a percentage of profit coming from, you know, any business that enters the ecosystem, the Natural Medicine Health Act, and that at a certain percentage, they would have to, you know, contribute a percentage to this fund. At a certain revenue level, they'd have to contribute. And there could be exemptions for that or whatever, but this fund would be for community-based practices and infrastructure and licensure. In Prop 122, there is subsidized licensure that's specific to like marginalized people. And I think that's a good thing. But licensure is not the same as like having your own practice, right? And so we were really advocating for that. So I can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't want to. There is that track. How much it's actually applied, because we've seen these sorts of social equity measures with cannabis just like fall completely flat. And once the laws actually pass and all of the energy and resources go into the market, it's like yeah, there's this measure for people of color or people formerly incarcerated for cannabis charges to be expedited and subsidized in getting their license, but then it's like, who do they have to work for, right? It's like, say it again.
They also just threw out half of the licenses.
Yeah, they're doing that process in New York.
Yeah, Aaron was filling me in on
The
that.
nuance.
Yeah,
It's
and-
like,
and-
if you're out of state charges, you can't apply.
And then in
With the-
Colorado, for example, there were social equity measures. But people to actually, you know, like try to like start their own practices and their own business, their own dispensaries, they'd have to go to venture capital, you know, like because we haven't prioritized a actual like equitable sourcing for community-based infrastructure and stewardship. So if we're not doing that, we're not actually talking about equity. And I do actually feel like it's harmful and disrespectful and like misusing the word. And this is why like so many of our words of justice, equity, and regeneration, like they're all so watered down. We have to be very precise with our language, and we shouldn't let our language get co-opted. When people are saying equity, be like, what do you mean? Please break down how this is equitable. And if we have a solid analysis, and there is real reparations being built into drug policy and real equity and more of a, I think, awareness, especially in this movement, that, you know, reparations isn't charity, it's mutual aid. That for us to regenerate for all of our health and well-being, our healing is bound up in each other's, you know, can't keep doing this. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered that question, but.
Well, so you're gonna be around a little bit longer. I think we want to get through the rest of our agenda and be respectful of Mike's time and have him tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon here in New York. But Duffy, thank you so much for coming all the way.
So Mike.
Yeah, let's bring Mike up. While Mike is coming up, we'll introduce Mike. We'll just let you know that the umbrella organization for the New York Psilocybin Action Committee is New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives. And we had our first big board meeting where we elected new board members. Dennis Kitchen from Buffalo is one of them. Lee from the Hudson Valley Psychedelic Society is another. Ruchi Tana is here somewhere, another board member. We
And Pammy's on.
and Pammy's on the virtual, so we've got Naima in the house here, but we've been doing a lot of fundraising and we, not a lot of fundraising, a little bit of fundraising. We're putting some money in the bank account and we did a disc golf tournament in Troy, New York. And I want to show you, these discs. These are for sale. For the New York Psilocybin Action Committee, New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, David, my husband, has got a bag of discs. If people want to buy them here tonight, they're $25 a disc. We had a house party concert to raise funds. And we don't have a lot in the bank, so that's why we are so excited that Mike Avella has offered his services to us pro bono as a community to give us a sense of what the possible is in terms of decriminalizing, legalizing, you know, opening up some access to psilocybin here in New York. So we just had an election. You know, there's a lot of turnover in the New York State Legislature. We've got a couple of bills pending, and I wanted to turn it over to Mike to introduce himself so we can say thank you to him, but also to have him talk to us a little bit about what's possible in 2023. Mike.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll say first and foremost, I have two hats. One is the hippie at home wearing tie-dye and like maybe experimenting. I have my Grateful Dead thing here. Yeah, the other is I have to wear a suit, but I have to. So this is my pragmatic suit. So I'm Mike Avella. I'm with the lobby for Kingston and Avella. We're contract lobbyists. We contract with everyone. We have professional sports teams, telecommunications, healthcare, you name it, we do it. But my favorite clients are the ones I can really get into. We help with bail reform, discovery reform, raise the age for criminal penalties for kids. We worked on recreational and medical marijuana. And we're working on, voting rights reforms. And so we're not scared of really controversial stuff. I actually thrive on it. Yeah, of course. And so I guess, the reason I'm here personally, I'm very good friends with CJ. I've known him since freshman year of college. He's a great expert on this. He connected me to Aaron. And I was like, look, I got to get into this. And so I talked to the firm. I'm not the partner. I have bosses to report to, but I told them I'm doing this. You're not the thing that's what to do. So anyways, I won't bore you with all the details, but we did just have an election. A few months ago, the governor was up like 20-25 points. She ended up winning by like 6. Some people said she might lose. I was saying she's going to win by like 8 points, but there's a lot of interesting things that came out of it. And looking on there, I see Nick from Rosenthal's office. All right, so I'll temper my words. So it was a really close race, but there were some significant complexities. There's a lot of people jockeying for credit. The Working Families Party and the Progressives are really taking a lot of credit for the last maybe 300 to 400 votes that put her over the edge. And so some people think that may make the governor more progressive coming up, even though she got hammered for crime stuff. She is more of a centrist individual. So anything I say now really means nothing. We'll see what happens. But there's some possibilities there. In the Senate, they lost, the Democrats lost 1 or 2 seats. There's 1 seat they may pick up. Either way, they have 41 seats to the Republicans, 21. In the Assembly, the Democrats lost a few seats. they still have like 100 seats compared to the Republicans 50. So that being said, before I got into this, I just assumed this was a partisan issue. And then people kind of educated me on that. I think before I get in, okay, one more thing actually. So a lot of very prominent legislators lost. A lot of the big time chairs lost. And so there's going to be a lot of jockeying for position by the legislators. In particular, the Assembly Health Chair retired. This bill will go through the Health Committee. So I have a good idea, and I think Corinne does too, of who it's going to be. She would be great. But a lot of this really depends on how these things fall into place. So there's going to be a lot of jockeying there. And it also really, I mean, we're going to have to start looking at Senate sponsors. Right now, all these bills are in the Assembly. My specialty actually is the Senate, even though I do a lot of work with the Assembly. So once Linda and Pat, once we all kind of come together, I'll try to help you guys land some good sponsors in the Senate. What was I going before that?
Well, I wonder whether this crowd knows that there are 3 bills pending. Well, really 4 with the Rivera bill, but.
Yeah, so the Rivera bill, which was mentioned earlier, would follow the federal schedule. That's actually in front, well, it hasn't been called by the governor yet for signature, but it's passed both houses. So I believe so. I'm like 95% sure, because I talked to Gustavo Rivera. He's like, why are you talking about this? It's already passed. So, well, yeah, that I also planted that seed. I'll check and see if that's waiting to be signed by the governor. If it is, I'll see if you guys can provide me like a memo of support. So I can talk to the governors, help people. But I mean, this is like the nitty gritty stuff. If you guys do the community organizing, I talk to the lawyers and the members and get them educated. I think what I was getting to was this is clearly not a partisan issue, and that's really great because it's significantly different from the marijuana legalization. I mean, marijuana, besides the huge influx of money, which was an impetus for it passing, there was the whole marginalized communities, which again, I'm not an expert in shrooms or any of this stuff, besides maybe, college and all that, but I do not think there is the big push like the Black and brown communities that were affected by marijuana. And so that's not advantageous. I don't want to say that, but if that was true, it would be advantageous for passage. So not having that, I think we need to think about other strategies. The mental health aspect, to me, has got to be the way that we push this. I do a lot of work with veterans and veterans' mental health. I mean, that alone would get so many people on board for this. Law enforcement, I can't believe that law enforcement people are on board with this. That's awesome. Because when we were working on marijuana, they were out against it significantly. Getting people on board like PTAs, that's going to be hugely important. And just kind of building coalitions. I know you guys have the community work, but we actually have to figure out how to build out the community besides just the supporters. We need the names, we need the organizations that are very impactful. I mean, quite frankly, any celebrities we can get on board. When we got bail reform passed, we had Meek Mill out tweeting, Jay-Z tweeting. So it sounds trite, but stuff like that is really important because you may have staffers that are fans that therefore will move a bill because of that, or just little things like that. So, it's pretty complex and it's going to be a fun battle, but I don't know. I'm just like the conduit for you guys, but my thinking is that parallel tracks really should be the way to go. Like, I know that's just legislatively and policy wise. As far as what you guys want, that's fine, but I think that pushing for all angles is pretty important because we want to, push the policies that are going to work, but also kind of make the inroads for future success.
Yeah, the mental. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask because I worked on a bill called the Treatment Not Joe campaign. I was the upstate organizing lead this past year. And we had a lot of conversation around introducing aspects of the bill into the budget, starting the conversation early in the session.
Yep.
And have you guys discussed some of the merits or pros and cons of maybe following a similar process for a psilocybin initiative?
Yes, so we actually did discuss this. Traditionally, in the past few years, well, I don't know if most of you are probably not familiar with the budget process. In New York State, the budget is the budget, but then it's also every piece of legislation that they could possibly jam into it. They get through, and it's like crazy stuff. But the past few years, they've tried to keep non-fiscal policy out, just because they were trying to keep it to a strict budget. that also may have had something to do with the fact that the legislature and Andrew Cuomo hated each other. And I think there's a little bit of a more congenial relationship between Kathy Hochul and the legislature. We'll see what happens now that she's fully elected, so she may take a stronger stance, but yes, that would have been my angle on it. The full decrim part, that would be tougher, but I do think there's an avenue for that as well, especially if there's a fiscal impact. I know the Burke bill, I'm pretty sure has a fiscal impact, so that definitely, I think that's an avenue. Either that or at the end of session, there's a bill called Big Ugly, which also that's where like the second garbage plate bill. So yeah, no, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, the just to speak on, the avenues and the mental health aspect. So Corinne and I were just interviewed by the mental health reporter for the Times Union, specifically on the psilocybin action. And we pointed her to several people that we've spoken to, one of which I encountered at a festival. And, I was vending for my gourmet mushroom stuff. And this person came up and was just like, I mean, they happen to have a few drinks already and we're a little red, but we're really excited and having a good time. But they disclosed that they were a former Army vet, special ops, having operated in the Middle East, state trooper, captain, having worked with the governor's office, supervised other state troopers who had taken their own lives and helped wives through their transition periods, and was currently microdosing on psilocybin to help manage his own trauma. And that he was working with the Heroic Hearts Project to go get a legal ceremony out of state. And that's what, thankfully, he actually agreed to anonymously give testimony to this article that's coming out the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So I think this too is going to be a huge, it's the more of that caliber of person that we can put out and say, as much as he did not want to be disclosed, I think the more that we can get people to start to do that, the more the flood will happen and say, oh, like you were saying, the police are coming forward, the EMT, the fire responders, all these people, everyone that experiences trauma, social workers. I mean, everybody experiences trauma. And the thing is that is really, I think, the angle that's going to help put this bill on more laps. And like you mentioned, the Burke bill in particular does have a fiscal part to it, because they do want to build in a fund for accessibility for people that are marginalized and can't afford it. And so, the treatment to people who might be able to, shell out money is going to be probably thousands of dollars. But I mean, you're talking about multiple days of therapy with a trained person and the medicine and liability, because really it all comes down to who can sue who in New York. But it's for people who can afford it, being able to give them that experience still, I think is critical. And, like Duffy was saying, ensuring that marginalized people still have access in some way is going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's something like this that's very complex and will be high profile. You can have the best advocates in the world, you can have the best lobbyists in the world, and I think you have both. But what you really need is people like that. You need the stories. You need people like us. We can do behind the scenes to set the stage and to help it, but you're not going to get over the finish line unless you have people like that will tell the success stories and to make people realize this is not just people trying to go get high.
Right.
It's literally people can't get, you can't get therapy now. I mean, there's veterans that are committing suicide because they can't get help.
Right.
This is what can help that. So. Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked to Mike about when he came on board was the need to do a lobby day in Albany in the beginning of the session. So the legislative calendar isn't out yet, but once it is, we're going to take a look at it and try to get people to join us in Albany for a lobby day and have those stories shared. And, hopefully Mike's firm will be able to set up meetings for us with all of the lawmakers who need to hear those stories. And I hope we can count on all of you to consider coming to Albany and helping facilitate that sharing, right?
Yeah, and we'd also talk, I don't know if Jana's on, but we had talked about in between Christmas and November doing a panel, doing a round table, hopefully getting Linda Rosenthal and Pat Berg, in addition to a bunch of stories like a cop, pastor, just like a little bit of everything.
The Reconsider group down in the Catskill has a great bank of people that.
Whatever you guys can pull together, and then I can try to get as many legislators and staffers to join it and just listen.
So like a virtual Zoom forum.
The round table, and then just, we did that for criminal justice reforms. You invite every staff member, every legislator, whoever can come, they come.
Just a quick thing to add to that came to mind from what you're mentioning. We've also, a bunch of us around the country have started an initiative called Decrim First, which is about prioritizing decrim. And a few of us have started working, and some of us have already been working on law enforcement outreach. And that came to mind because what just came up a bunch of times. I met last year with former police chief of Albany, who's now an activist against the drug war, and when interviewed on camera, directly speaking to local legislators about why you should decriminalize psychedelics as a path to ending the drug war. He's mentioned other folks that are within his networks. Working with a friend who's produced and directed stuff for Netflix, who interviewed and produced something with a cop from active cop from Massachusetts who's getting MDMA therapy certification currently, and did an extended interview about that. So we're working with some other amazing folks to organize those materials in a way that can be used both locally and across the country. So if there's anybody, right now is a great time to get involved and helpful, whether you know cops or don't, whether you like cops or don't, and recognize the importance. So if anybody's interested in getting involved with that, please check in with me after.
District attorneys.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I want to mention. I'm currently being prosecuted for 4 different psychedelics, and my district attorney knew what's happening in Oregon and immediately dropped the psilocybin to a misdemeanor, and was very receptive to me talking all about. I have a religious nonprofit. I do a lot of psychedelic organizing, and will continue to, regardless of what they say and do. I made that super clear in an email, and they're receptive to it. So
is that Alvin, right?
Is
that Manhattan?
It's Ulster County.
Yeah.
State Bar, OCA, like those are two really big influential forces. If OCA turns out against something, it's very easy for them to get stopped. But we were able to work with the Public Defenders Association to get our bill through the approval process of the New York State Bar. And we actually ended up the New York State Bar signing off on a major piece of criminal justice reform. So that may be also an avenue. There's a lot of interest groups like PEP and the NASW, people who are, ideologically adjacent, who would be affected by this and maybe supportive. So those are all avenues that we've worked,
So one of the other things that we started a Discord server, and we have broken down into committees. So we have a fundraising committee, we have a legislative committee, we have events committees. So for anyone that wants to join any of those specific committees to help brainstorm and move this forward, because I do feel like the momentum is here and the timing is here, and the ball is rolling down the hill, and it's just about it's on us to direct it, and we need to make sure that it lands in the right little what is it, plinko slot, it's like
one related to that, very importantly though, it's really important to have a unified voice. I'm sure this community, there's different viewpoints, but we can't have fighting outside in public, in front of legislators, anything like that. It's just you have to have unified, decide what we want to do, try to push everything, figure out the best way forward.
So to that end, Amy, are there the flyers, the NYPAC flyers, if you could pass those around? I want to give a shout out to Ruchi Khanna, who helped design this flyer. This is an outreach flyer that we developed that has 5 fast facts about psilocybin. And if you are interested in joining our legislative committee to talk about these plans moving forward, I encourage you to get in touch with us. Take some of those flyers to recruit others to work with us. But the way forward is really, we're starting to get meetings with lawmakers now. We're planning this lobby day. And then we're going to have an event called Spotlight on Mental Health Alternatives from March 20th to March 24th at the New York State Capitol. So if you wants to join us with a table, a heavily traversed corridor of the Capitol where we can talk girl spread by the well. Let us know and we'll coordinate with you.
I think just one parting word that I can pass on, and I think Duffy said something related to this, is like, it doesn't have to be now too fast. You have to realize this is going to be tough, and it's going to be a battle, and wouldn't expect immediate results. It's going to take a lot of work from everybody, and just got to be persistent.
One of the good things that came out of COVID was doing the listening sessions, the education sessions, where you can, even if you don't get the legislator, they'll send their staffers. And the turnouts of those have been huge, so we've gotten a lot of success of engaging with folks around that.
So by the way, the staffers are generally more helpful anyways.
Yeah, yeah.
So online, we actually have a New York, someone that has cluster headaches and PTSD and is a New York firefighter.
Awesome.
Of New York City firefighter. So like, and he's saying, he wants to like, obviously, good testimony and share that too. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool.
Is there anything else that we didn't cover?
I mean, the only thing I wanted to point out, if you didn't look at the table by the door, this is a microdosing guidebook by CJ right there.
I'm CJ Spotswood. I came in from Maine today. I'm originally from New York. My family is here in New York, up around Alex Bay area. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I've been a psych nurse for over 20 years. And my family, my brother lives in Maine. That's where I'm at now. Online. I'm sorry you couldn't make it, Beth. I know 20 minutes is probably too far. But yeah, so I've been working with psychedelics for 5 years now. I've done education with psychedelics today through their Vital program. I've done their clinicians and therapists program. I've also was one of the co-writers for Psychedelic Support for their psilocybin education for healthcare providers. It's like a 9-hour program that's accredited that I ended up working on. I'm also a student at CIIS in their psychedelic therapist and research program. So I've been working with macro doses. I wrote a book on microdosing. I don't think that these medicines should just come from the medical model. Otherwise I wouldn't be here, but I feel that my influence and my privilege allow me to kind of educate healthcare providers to let them know that this isn't the scary stuff that they are worried about, and trying to go back from that. This is your brain on drugs that we all grew up with, the egg in the frying pan of the 80s. There's still people that believe that, and a lot of them have a lot of power in healthcare, and we need to kind of go against that. So I appreciate, and I'm glad that you guys invited me here. Thank you. And if anyone has questions, I'm available to answer questions. Anyone has like healthcare with like their providers or like looking for, I've got resources on my website to kind of help educate healthcare providers. So thank you.
Great. Thanks.
And the books, yeah.
I have them up here.
And another, something that you're called MPO nurse, right?
MPO nurse, yeah.
MPO nurse.
Yes, my background is nursing, holistic. I went to a holistic school of nursing. I didn't even realize until after I started the program. I went to, I was on maternity. Now all of a sudden, like, why am I doing classes on Reiki and yoga and security? So I really have learned with that kind of the holistic piece, which reinforced is, in nursing as opposed to medical model, you treat the whole person, not just the illness. And that's where I think that this is kind of the approach. This is a different way of going about it. And when it comes to the medical model, I hate to say it, but I'm doing the same thing over again, expecting something different is the definition of insanity. And we need to change that. So thank you guys.
And I just want to say Bill Brennan, who also is on the board of NYPAC, tuned in today. So so sorry we missed you before.
So our next meeting is December 13th, is that right?
If that's a Tuesday.
I think our next meeting is Tuesday, December 13th.
And if anyone here in this room, I mean, we always do a Zoom component, and when we meet in the farm, it's a little bit more intimate, and you can hear, I promise, or maybe we'll start getting mics or something, I don't know. But there's always a Zoom component, so you can join from afar or take Dennis's cue and just drive because it's important.
But we're also committed to doing a meeting in New York City.
Right, and we do one in Buffalo, so we do want to get out to the lens. The church. Can we meet in your church?
It's available for rent.
Oh, okay, cool.
Great.
Cool. And so, you know, and if anyone knows people in the Finger Lakes region, we'd also, that's one area, and like the upper Adirondacks that we don't have a lot of advocates that we've connected to already. So people in the Finger Lakes, we want to like create a mycelial primordial node there too. And really one of our goals is to get on each legislator's desk a book that has testimony, ideally from people in every county, all 52 counties across New York, you know, that will have research and you know, the history of psilocybin. So it's, you know, and obviously the staffers are going to be the ones that are going to read it, but you know.
Is the best to care about their constituents than anyone else.
Okay.
Like you're saying, if you can actually grab some people that each legislative district, that's key.
Yeah, that's what our goal. Yeah. So really it's important to, you know, make those connections. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining us.
And what do you want people
Go back over Peace Festival, 1970, up there in Toronto.